The file wasn't supposed to exist. A classified document sealed for over a decade, locked inside a forgotten storage vault at Fort Bragg. No title, no rank, just a single call sign stamped in faded black ink, Shadow 7. For years, no one knew whose name it belonged to, until someone finally opened it. And when they did, everything changed. Before we begin, if you believe respect should be earned, not mocked, hit like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Because when Shadow 7 is spoken in this story, the air goes still, and nothing will ever be the same. At Fort Bragg, Staff Sergeant Selene Marlowe swept floors and served meals while everyone whispered behind her back. A quiet medic transfer who kept her head down and secrets buried. Until one morning when her sleeve rolled up slightly while reaching for supplies, revealing ink that shouldn't exist on a medical officer's arm.
The morning air at Fort Bragg carried discipline and expectation. This was where future Special Forces leaders were forged, where weakness wasn't tolerated. Staff Sergeant Selene Marlowe stood at the training courtyard edge, feeling every whisper, every dismissive laugh. 28 years old, composed, professional, but in their eyes she was just another medic who somehow talked her way into leadership training. "Why is she even here?" one cadet muttered. "Medics don't belong with real soldiers." Lieutenant Corbin Vance, 25 and overflowing with entitled arrogance, made it his personal mission to remind everyone of her place. During morning combat drills, he'd raise his voice for all to hear. "Careful out there, Marlowe. Wouldn't want you breaking a nail." The laughter that followed was predictable, expected. But Selene never responded, never defended herself, never gave them the reaction they wanted. Because Selene Marlowe had learned that the loudest person in the room usually had the least to prove. 2 weeks into the program, while others focused on social hierarchy, Selene noticed things. A security camera that flickered for exactly 1.7 seconds during evening chow. Encrypted data packets routing through servers that shouldn't exist at this clearance level. Digital footprints suggesting someone was watching the watchers. She documented everything in a small, weathered notebook. Coordinates, timestamps, patterns that would mean nothing to most people but told a story to those who knew how to read between the lines. That night, during what should have been a routine evening briefing, the impossible happened. The overhead projector froze mid-presentation. A system override notification flashed across every screen in the facility. Restricted access login. Authorization code Shadow 01. The instructor frantically tried to regain control, but the system had been locked out by something far above his security clearance. Then Selene's tablet, sitting innocuously on her desk, vibrated once with an incoming message. 4 words, no sender, no signature. Shadow 7, stand by. Across the aisle, Sergeant Carla Moreno caught the brief flash of text on Selene's screen. Her eyes widened as understanding crawled across her face. Whatever Shadow 7 meant, it wasn't the call sign of some random medical transfer. Hours later, miles away in a classified operations center that didn't officially exist, Colonel Kane stared at his monitor as alerts cascaded across multiple security networks. The name he hadn't seen in 7 years was active again. Shadow 7 protocol reactivated. Kane's jaw tightened as memories flooded back. Black Ridge, 12 operators trapped behind enemy lines. 3 extraction teams failed. Mission declared a total loss. Then she appeared out of nowhere, with a 4-person unit and no authorization, walking straight into a death trap that should have been impossible to survive. 47 minutes later, every single operator was walking home. Shadow 7 activated, Kane whispered to himself, grabbing his cap and heading for the door. Because when that call sign resurfaced, someone was about to learn they had no idea who they'd been mocking. By morning, Fort Bragg felt different. The air hung heavier. Conversations carried unease instead of casual cruelty. Lieutenant Vance, still oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, continued his performance. "Guess the medic's big secret is out," he announced to anyone within earshot. "Probably hacked the system herself. Desperate move for attention." But his audience wasn't laughing as easily as before. Something had changed, and even the most arrogant couldn't ignore the tension building like pressure before a storm. The change came with the sound of boots on marble, precise, measured, carrying the weight of absolute authority. The training hall doors opened, and Colonel Kane entered like a force of nature. Late 40s, broad-shouldered, chest decorated with ribbons that told stories of battles fought in places that didn't exist on any official map. But it wasn't his uniform that commanded instant silence. It was the weight he carried, earned through leading men into impossible situations and bringing them home alive. Colonel Kane's gaze swept the room until it found its target. Shadow 7, stand by. The room froze. Vance blinked in confusion. "Wait, what?" Kane's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Staff Sergeant Selene Marlowe, front and center." Selene stood with the quiet precision of someone accustomed to orders that carried life or death consequences. She walked down the aisle, boots striking the floor in perfect rhythm, until she stood directly before the colonel. Kane's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Good to see you again, Shadow 7. Gasps rippled through the assembled cadets. Vance, still processing what he was witnessing, managed a nervous laugh. "This is some kind of joke, right? She's just a transfer, a medic." The colonel turned his full attention to the lieutenant, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Lieutenant, you've said enough." The colonel addressed the room with absolute authority. 7 years ago, during the Black Ridge incident, 12 Special Forces operators were trapped in enemy territory. 3 extraction teams failed. The mission was declared a total loss. Then one operator, call sign Shadow 7, led an unauthorized 4-person rescue mission into territory we'd already written off as unrecoverable. No air support, no backup, no chance of survival. 47 minutes later, every one of those operators was walking again. She didn't just save their lives, she saved mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Vance had gone pale, the arrogance draining from his face as understanding finally dawned. Kane faced the room one final time. "From this moment forward, you will address her by her proper designation. Staff Sergeant Selene Marlowe, Shadow 7 Unit." Then something remarkable happened. A single cadet near the back stood and raised his hand in a perfect salute. Then another, and another. Within seconds, every person in the room was on their feet, boots aligned, back straight, arms raised in perfect unison. Selene Marlowe stood before them, silent and unshakable. She wasn't the medic they'd mocked or the outsider they'd dismissed. She was Shadow 7, and now everyone knew exactly who that meant.